Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bien bonitos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe, but there's no one we love more. The good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July the 28th, 2020. Grado Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton is marvelous, but there was this game called Fear Factor that was on television years ago, and people were playing in it, and seeing how far they could take their fears of certain things.
Yep.
I think that's the area that we've crossed into in sports, is the fear factor. And once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders. I know you guys are having troubling days every day in America with this pandemic spreading at the rate that it is, but you keep working hard and diligently every day to save American lives.
I believe there's a song called We Fall Down, but we get up. We'll get up. Today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he would do his thing from 3,000 miles away, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Amazon TV, Apple TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I've been pausing. Big C, I've been pausing so much, I think I lost like 6 pounds over the last 2 weeks, but I'll never lose weight when it comes to the Veterans Crisis Hotline. Never want to shed that, and they really are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones who fall down. They help them get back up. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, we address this issue every day that we have a show. I would love for the White House to address this issue one of these days in their White House briefing room, Charlton, whether the president or Kayleigh McEnany,
November
to let
3rd.
you know the strife that our veterans are in this country by losing some 22 a day to suicide. And that's an urgent and pressing issue. I understand we have the coronavirus pandemic that's been ravishing the world and America for the past several months. But this, military suicide, Charlton, has been ravishing our country for several years, over decades, and we need to find a way to stem the tide of it. Mental issues is a grave issue in America, Charlton, but many people look at it as an embarrassment when you talk about mental issues. It's almost like talking about racism. Now is not the time to talk about it, but when people want to get around to it, we've lost another veteran, Charlton, 22 every day.
Wow.
And so as we give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, it needs to become more of a pressing issue in society. I know COVID-19 has taken the issue and the thoughts of many people, Charlton, but we have veterans that lose their lives to COVID-19 also beyond just suicide.
We want to do our part, and all we can do is tell people when you fall down, you can get back up by calling 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. That gets them up. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help there. Really appreciate giving out that number. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. The goal is simple. Recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV, just like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, and sports teams are doing it now. Big C, watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624, and really look forward to how things are growing with Big C Sports. I want to just touch on, I know there's a lot of stuff going on. The NFL has guys that are supposed to be showing up. NHL hockey, they're trying to get some advantage in Canada by bringing everybody into Canada. But I remember when I was I think several years ago there was a movie called New Jack City, and I knew that Wesley Snipes was in it. And so, as I said, I've been hearing a lot about guys going to New Jack City, but I pulled up New Jack City. I didn't see anybody with chicken wings, Big C, and I was trying to find where that player Lou Williams was going for the Clippers, but I didn't see anything about New Jack City and chicken wings, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, everybody's made a long stretch on Magic City and Lou Williams going in to pick himself up dinner, Charlton. It's one of the adult establishments in the city of Atlanta, which they have a plethora of, Charlton, and all around the United States and every major city, these adult entertainment clubs are around. I mean, you got to take yourself back to when you were a kid, you were hiding your Playboy magazine under your mattress, thinking nobody knew it was under there. But I can imagine several people in the house knew it was probably in there, Charlton.
Yep.
But when you look at Magic City, you just can't go to an adult establishment just to sit and watch and drink. You have to have something to help absorb the alcohol or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Most of these places have high-end restaurants, 3- and 4-star restaurants, Charlton. The food service is tremendous. I mean, you look at some of these places, you're going to go in, you're going to spend $35, $40 for a steak.
Yeah.
So you know that's not some little place on the corner that, got grease dripping underneath the door.
Yeah, don't knock those places that are dripping grease, Big C. Last time, there was a lady by the name of Carol Doda. She used to be over in San Francisco. Last time I visited an establishment, and people can say what they want, but adult people do what adult people do. I was down in Las Vegas, and when I went to a gentleman's club, I'm telling you, it's the weirdest thing, but maybe not so weird. There were as many women inside the club as there were men, and I don't know if they're being catty or trying to see how they compare with the other women that are on the stage, but there were as many women clapping and giving whistling calls as there were men, Big C. Your thoughts?
It's very common, Charlton. Women go into these establishments, they demand dances and pay for them.
Yeah.
They're part of a society. I mean, like I said, it's entertainment. I mean, you think about when you go to Vegas and you go to a dinner show at one of the casinos, Charlton.
Yeah.
You just don't go in there to watch the entertainment. You go in there to have dinner, have drinks, then watch the show. This is the same thing as an adult entertainment show.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at some of these shows in Vegas, they're topless, Charlton, and very scantily clad. So really, what's the difference in going to a show in Vegas at a major casino versus going to an adult establishment in a major city?
Yeah, this was before COVID hit, Big C. I remember that I went to give a tip, just like you want to give a tip when somebody does a good job, and she was cold. I thought they'd be more warm-blooded, if that makes any sense to you. Hey, but it's all fair level war. People do what they want to do. I want to touch on, speaking of cold, I know a lot of people don't think about Canada since Trudeau's kicked all of our scumbag country. I guess we're an SO country now, Big C, because POTUS kind of messed everything up. But Trudeau kicked everybody out and said he doesn't want anyone from that SO country bigger than germs up to Canada. But I look at NHL hockey, and we talk about what's going on with different situations in the States, Big C. But can a Canadian team win a Stanley Cup ending the U.S. dominance because they're going to be hosting north of the border, Big C, this time? Your thoughts?
Well, it all depends on, Charlton, how uncomfortable those American teams are being away from home, being isolated.
Yeah.
You got to look at the mental factor that affects players. Everybody reacts differently. Going to training camp is one thing when you're there for 2 or 3 weeks, Charlton. Then you get a chance to get back with your family. But being isolated for a couple months, it's going to be a different reactionary tale. It's going to come down to the team with the most veterans on them, Charlton, the most seasoned veterans.
Yeah.
Is what you're going to be looking at. Guys who don't need to get out and get to those adult entertainment clubs, Charlton, that you're going to have in Edmonton as well as in Toronto. Those players that can stay in the bubble more comfortably, that don't mind reading a comic book at night when they're laying in bed or watching some Real Housewives show.
Yeah. I tell you, I love, don't laugh at me, but I think I'm a little bit cultured, Big C. I love the Housewives of Atlanta. I love the Housewives of Beverly Hills. And I like the women from Atlanta a lot more. They just seem more natural. That's just my opinion. Everybody has their own flavor of toast. But I really love watching the Housewives of Atlanta. In fact, I have a friend, I won't say who he is, but he knows some of the people that are on the program too. But going back up to Canada, where I think they love Housewives of the United States, but they just won't let any Housewives in from the United States. When you look about the teams, with the I guess 6 of Canada's 7 franchises competing in this year's 2014 format, there's no guarantee that they're going to become one of the first teams in 27 years to win the Stanley Cup since Montreal defeated the LA Kings. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the Canadian participation, Charlton, and the reason why the U.S. teams have been so dominant, it's about money.
Really?
What you can afford as far as players, when you can put together all-star rosters and make them a dominant program. I mean, we've seen Canadian teams in the championship, in the Stanley Cup championship over the past several years. I know Vancouver was in not too long ago when they played. And so it's just about streaking, getting hot at the right time on the ice and not melting it, but being able to skate freely on it.
Yeah, being able to skate freely, which they also have at the chicken clubs or the Magic City. I was Googling New Jack City. I got to Google Magic City and see what I was missing. It's all chicken wings are chicken wings, no matter where you get them. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not really. I mean, when you look at the price of the chicken wings at Magic City, they go about $1.70 a piece for one chicken wing. So, I mean, they got to be a little more special than something you're going to get in a drive-through window.
Yeah, no one wants drive-through chicken wings, that's for sure. But some men do. It's all fair, love, and war. And speaking of hockey, I don't know if they like chicken up in Canada, but the hockey, you're thinking about it, the number one sport in Canada, I think it was March 3rd, 1875, saw the first indoor hockey game. It was the Montreal team, and they actually beat the Toronto Arenas. It was 10-9, Big C. And now, of course, they've spanned down into the United States, and it seems like the American teams have dominated a lot. Outside of the Toronto Raptors winning their first ever NBA championships, it seems like what you said, a lot of the money is pouring into the American teams for some reason. It'd be nice to see Canada get a win in this COVID-19 shortened season. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar, the American dollar is worth a little more. So when a franchise offers you more money down here in the U.S. versus in Canada, you're going to get a lot more money. So and back to the chicken wings, I think the chicken wings must be big up in Canada. Because you think about the original home of chicken wings, which is Buffalo, New York, which is a close proximity to Canada. That a lot of the interactions between those two areas between Canada and Buffalo, New York. But Toronto has their minor league team there in Buffalo in baseball.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think that Buffalo wings are really big up there north of the border also.
Yeah, I think they're a different kind than the kind Moo Williams was getting. Do you like your Buffalo wings served cold or how you like them hot, Big C? Hot or cold? What's your preference, Big C?
Well, Charlton, it all depends on the restaurant that I'm going and ordering from. There's so many different flavors of wings now that you just don't have one type of wing. We're talking about dozens of different types of wings and flavors and temperatures, Charlton. It all depends on what your palate is craving at that moment.
Yeah, I like them hot when they're hot, but it's something about getting them out of the refrigerator the next day when they're cold. They taste sometimes just as good when they're cold. It's hot and cold, Big C. Just like people, sometimes people can be hot and sometimes people can be cold. I want to come back to the United States of America. As Trudeau calls the S-hole country, just like Otis says, it's amazing what goes around comes around. We can't get any of our S-hole athletes to go up to Canada and play. But today, you think about the NFL, at least for the guys that decided to show up, they were supposed to report to camp. And because a lot of guys are starting to read more, Big C, that means they pay attention to science and they pay attention to their doctors. We have some reported 23 NFL players that have opted out of the COVID-19 NFL football season, and they did it because they can read and also because they want to stay on the safer side of health. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's one of the pluses about the NFL, Charlton, that players have to go to college for at least a minimum of 3 seasons. So that means that they're going to spend a little more time in the classroom and understanding the science of what's going on with COVID-19 right now. I really respect these players for backing out of the league, Charlton, and there's going to be many more because the league can't say in any kind of way that they're protecting the players. You're going to test players for every day for 2 weeks while they're in training camp. But then you're only going to test them weekly after that, Charlton. So you're only testing a player once a week, and that player's had COVID-19 for 5 days. Think about all the people that they've come in contact with. When you think about basketball being in a bubble.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of protecting that. You think about the NHL being in a bubble. We've already seen what baseball will produce by not being in a bubble. And when you think about leaving a football facility every day, Charlton, you got 80 people going in 80 different directions. Nobody knows where those 80 people are going to end up. Then you got all those 80 people bringing those 80 different directions back into the locker room each day, not knowing who they've been in contact with, Charlton.
Yeah.
So the safety factor of these NFL players is a far gone conclusion, Charlton, that they're going to get ill from COVID-19. And the NFL has no plans in place to protect them.
Yeah, they do, Big C. They they say, hey, go get over it and get back in here and play. That seems to be the plan they have to protect them. Some notable players, Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, Marcus Cannon. You have Brandon Bolden, Michael Pierce. And that, I think New England had like 6 players. Belichick's maybe trying to figure out how they can have a losing season and get up into the NFL draft.
New England actually has 7 players that are not going to play this year. Tom Brady's not going to be there.
Yeah, well, he got traded. He made the dumbest decision of all. He went down into the fire, Big C. He was trying to go on the same path that a lot of players go down to Florida to retire. Eddie Goldman, and then the star Latui, Marquise Goodwin, and Devin Funchess. There'll be more players, too. And the smart guys, they claim it to be a medical reason. I guess they're going to have to get paid anyway. I don't know how you're going to withhold someone's pay if they have a medical reason. Or do you know any more about that? I don't think they can hold out your pay if you have a doctor's excuse, if that makes sense, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, one of the agreement that the players and the league made last week, Charlton, that any player chooses to opt it out for COVID-19 would be guaranteed at least $350,000 on the season.
Yeah.
So that's not a small chunk of change. I mean, you should be able to get by on $350,000, but you got to look at the long-term health risk that's going to come from COVID-19. There's no way that you can be spared from being exposed to COVID-19 if you're a football player. You're breathing, you're sneezing, you're coughing, you're sweating.
Yeah.
You're holding on to each other every play, Charlton. So how do you social distance that even when you line up, you can feel the breath of an opposing lineman across the line from you?
Yeah.
So there's no way that you can avoid COVID-19. What we've seen right now is the tip of the iceberg of players opting out.
Yeah.
And there's going to be several more key element players, Charlton, who opt out. When people talk about the disrespecting of the flag and disrespecting of the military, you have to look at how the NFL is disrespecting the livelihood and safety of these players and their families.
Yeah, you know what I would really love? Like that dumb guy, Mike Ditka, even though it was Ryan's defense that helped them win the championship. When dumb people say, if you disrespect the flag, I don't want to watch, take your butt down to the nearest office and sign up and join the military. And when you join the military, you'll realize you'll be fighting for the freedom to do whatever we can do. I don't want to hear any more knuckleheads said, I will not watch it if they take a knee. Take your butt down to your nearest military office and sign up and go put your money where your mouth is. Big C, NFL football, Ron Rivera, he gave Alex Smith, talk about falling down and getting back up. He gave Alex Smith the opportunity to win the Washington starting quarterback job on one condition, though, Big C. He got to stay out of places that have chicken wings, if that makes sense to you. Just being silly. But he's trying to make a full comeback to the NFL. He had a devastating leg injury that resulted in 17 surgeries, nearly cost him his life. He's thrown 142 touchdown passes, just 48 interceptions, and that's since the start of the 2011 season. So he has good numbers. Washington was 6-3, leading in the NFC East when Smith had that horrific leg injury, Big C. I mean, it was hard to just watch it, but as a quarterback, for him to come back, he was completing about 63% of his passes, 2,180 yards. He had 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and an 86 QBR rating. That's worthy of starting, but my goodness, you really got to be worried about a person who's had 17 surgeries, putting them in a COVID-19 season, and we've already dealt with CET that no one remembers now. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, this would be the most iconic comeback in sports history if Alex Smith was to be able to come back and make the roster of the Washington Football Club.
Yeah.
I don't know if he may compete, but I don't know if he can pass the physical, Charlton, of the team. That's what it comes down to. I think eventually that they will do a medical settlement with him, so they won't have such a huge salary cap hit in the future, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, you talk about the numbers that he had. This individual, since 2011, led 3 different NFL organizations to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so you think about the success that Alex Smith has gone under the radar. When you think about the statistics that you just rallied off about this man, Charlton, there's so many quarterbacks in the NFL that would love to have those type of numbers. I think what the Redskins are looking at overall is that he'd be about a $22 million cap hit.
Yeah.
If they cut him outright. So I think they're going to come up with a settlement. When you look at that leg was so grotesque, Charlton, after all the surgeries, and still is, because, when you take someone's quad muscle and make a calf muscle out of the deformities of that. But I don't think that the organization is willing to put him out there and potentially be under the pressure of these huge hulking linemen in the NFL, Charlton, someone falling on him. And even when he broke his leg, it wasn't a horrific hit.
Yeah.
It was just the torque that was on the leg.
And I think about Joe Theismann also for the Washington Redskins. Those guys that have played in that organization, those are 2 of the most well-known quarterbacks that had a horrific injury, Big C. Even just more on Alex Smith's resume, I remember when Colin Kaepernick came into the scene out of University of Nevada, and he was able to compete for – they put him in and said, my goodness, we haven't seen anybody like this in many, many years. That was Jim Harbaugh at the time. And so he was able to keep the job, and Alex Smith had to move on. But more on Alex Smith, not only did he have Washington winning, he won at Kansas City, won in San Francisco. In college, he was at Utah. I believe his head coach was Urban Meyer. I might be wrong about that. But they were undefeated at Utah when he played at Utah. And then if you go back to high school, he was a quarterback for Reggie Bush at Helix High School in La Mesa, California. So everywhere from high school to college and to the NFL, outside of a Super Bowl, he's been winning all of his career. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the one thing I look most at Alex Smith on is that the 2 quarterbacks that he lost his job to both went on to the Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick with the 49ers, Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs. So he's been a great mentor and tutor of younger quarterbacks when he's had the opportunity. That situation wasn't there in Washington. He didn't have a young quarterback waiting in the wings that they had drafted, but it shows you the pedigree of an Alex Smith. If you pay attention to him, you learn a lot.
Yeah, you do learn a lot, and I just, I wish him well. I've never had any surgeries. No, that's not true. I had a gunshot wound one time when I was a young boy, but that was my fault, Big C, and they stitched that up. But I just wish him the best. There's a lot of things in life that you got to appreciate, and men that fall down and get back up, man, they're just amazing. I wish them nothing but the best. But I also want to, you talked about Patrick Mahomes and Colin Kaepernick, 2 guys that put Alex Smith on the bench outside of an injury. When you think about Black American and the ability to own and where fortune comes from, I look at the NFL. You look at Patrick Mahomes, Big C. I remember him being in commercials with Discount Double Check, Aaron Rodgers, and then he went on to the Super Bowl. Now he's part owner of the Kansas City Royals ownership. Now I'm going to say something that may sound a little clairvoyant, but I know you were talking about really in the last month, so I'd say starting July, about black ownership and what it means to be an owner. Now, there's so many people saying he got the $500 million. Oh, he's so lucky. But the owner gave him that money, so now he's part owner of the Kansas City Royals baseball team. And I hope that, just like what you were talking about ownership, I hope that more men will look at that example, because once your playing days are over, you still make money as an owner. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, and he's followed in the footsteps of Aaron Rodgers in many ways. Aaron Rodgers owns a share of the Milwaukee Bucks, and now Patrick Mahomes, who as a kid spent a lot of years in the locker room of the Royals.
Yeah.
And that locker room was right across the parking lot there in Kansas City, Kauffman Field and Arrowhead Stadium. They're right across the parking lot from each other. So, you show up at training camp today driving a brand new Ferrari.
Yeah.
So you buy yourself a Ferrari, you buy yourself a piece of a professional baseball team, Charlton. That's not a bad month that Mr. Mahomes has had.
It's not a bad month at all. But I want to ask you something. Do you think that other players will look at what you just talked about with Aaron Rodgers and the Milwaukee franchise, and then with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City? I know Michael Jordan had his piece with the Carolina, basketball program.
Not a player, though. You're talking about current players.
Yeah, that's true. That as a current player, is this a precedent, or is it just? I'm not even being silly when I say this. When you start telling young black men to stop doing what you're doing as an employee, become an owner, I know, and I don't think I'm wrong by saying this. Just looking at history, white men have feared death and losing money. That's why militaries are so important. And also, when you talk about losing money, people start their sphincter tightens up. Big C, talking about people losing money and creating your own ownership. Do you think that in any way has anything to do with telling these guys, we'll give you ownership now, you don't have to leave? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is not a new issue in professional sports. Patrick Mahomes actually became the third active player today, when he brought in partnership with the Kansas City Royals. And so there are two other players other than him that are doing this, Charlton. You have to have enough of a salary to be able to go in and purchase a small minority percentage of an organization. So that's the key. Everybody's not in that position financially as players. But I don't know if players want to look at that responsibility of having to oversee other finances, Charlton, and dallying in things that you don't know anything about. And that's the biggest fear of anyone, is going into a field that you have no knowledge of and expecting for it to turn out right. It's just not for everybody. It's a good move for those people who make those moves, Charlton, in the current state of things, because the value of the product is only going to go up. You think about baseball. Baseball is a $10 billion a year business.
Wow.
Think about $10 billion a year business.
Yeah.
So to be able to invest in a corporation that turns that type of revenue is a pretty good move.
Yes, it's a good move, and I hope it will be more of an option. I don't believe, and I may be wrong, but if it were known that people would talk about it, I don't believe LeBron James is owner, and he might be the number one marketable athlete in the world outside of Tiger Woods, as far as a team player. But he doesn't own anything of the LA Lakers. I think Magic had a part of ownership at the time, and he does now with the LA Dodgers. But as a current player, isn't that something? Patrick Mahomes, new to the scene, and even beat King James to ownership. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, actually, LeBron does have ownership in a professional organization. You got to think about it, Charles. You're not going to be able to buy ownership in a league that you work in.
Yeah.
All of these players are buying interest in leagues that they're not performing in.
Yeah. Because
it's a conflict of interest if you do that. All of a sudden, especially with sports betting, the way that it is, the league is not going to condone you having ownership in a league that you can potentially dictate the outcome of a game. So I can understand that you don't allow a player to have ownership in a sport that he's participating in.
And very well said. We're going to take what's called the Big Seat Pause, also known as the Big Seat Timeout. When we come back, we're going to talk more about some of the things that happen in the world of football, basketball, and baseball. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big Seat Timeout, also known as the Big Seat Pause. You can follow Big Seat Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the number one podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. So many things I really appreciate about the growth of Big C Sports, and really looking forward to more great things happening. Big C, I want to jump down to the world of Major League Baseball, and it seems like I'm going to tell a really stupid story. One time I went to this restaurant, and the food was so good. It wasn't chicken wings, Big C. I wish it was chicken wings. But the food was so good. I'm telling you, a cockroach climbed out of my rice. Okay? The food was so good, I just clicked the cockroach to the side, and I made sure that there was no more in the rice hanging out, and my dumb butt continued eating it anyway. So it probably tastes like chicken legs anyway, or chicken wings, but I ate it because it was good. But that's the last time I went to that restaurant. Okay, it's in the Bay Area. Now, Major League Baseball, how many cockroaches do they got to see before they stop playing baseball, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, Rob Manfred, went on television and said that, that this is not a bad sign for
Right.
baseball. That he's not worried about this pandemic
Yep.
because you have some 19 Florida Marlins players infected.
Yeah.
I think Florida right now is the hottest state in the country. They haven't had, over the last 11 days, they haven't had less than 9,400 positive tests in a single day, Charlton,
Yeah.
in the state. And here it is, you got the Marlins with 19 infected players on their roster. And Rob Manfred is saying, he's not concerned about this. I mean, be realistic, Mr. Manfred. Hit the stop button. Just say, hey, we were out here pimping the players is what we were doing.
Yeah.
The players were trying to make sure that they got in that year of service on their contract that put them a year closer to free agency.
Yeah.
Just say, okay, we started the season, let it go. You've gotten that year of service in.
Yeah.
But don't risk any more players. I mean, because when you look at the hottest state in the country, I believe you guys have 4 or 5 teams out there in California.
Yep.
There's a team in Arizona. There's a couple teams in Texas. There's a couple teams in Florida, Charlton. And this place is just going rampant as far as, positive tests of COVID-19. And so as you look at baseball and you're playing it for what? You don't have any butts in the seats.
No.
So you're not playing it for the fans. You can't tell that lie anymore. That the fans are wanting baseball and they can't come to the game.
Yeah.
It's a lackluster event when you watch it on television. It's like watching practice. That's what it's like. You're watching a scrimmage.
Yep.
And so realistically, you're risking people's lives for what?
I think for money. There's no pimp that tells us his workers stop working because he's concerned about their health. Because he just wants them to bring in that money, and that's it's true. It's just really true the way it is. I want to, not the 49ers, but the San Diego Padres. They're in San Francisco tonight to play the Giants. When they flew in town, there's a lot of people getting off the airport. They're not doing social distancing. It's almost like a spring break mentality. People just think, hey, if they get it, they'll get over it, and they probably will. But it's who they affect that makes more sense. But how can you tell rich people what to do with their own money and with their own health? But Major League Baseball, following the Marlins outbreak, the vast majority of the Washington National players, would you believe, they did something that John Lewis talked about that Mitch McConnell is still trying to gut the voting rights big. But they voted against traveling to Miami for a 3-game series this upcoming weekend. So the players do have a voice, but they got to exercise their voice. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's what it comes down to. I mean, you think about it. This pandemic, I think, started up in Atlanta, Charlton, because the Marlins were in Atlanta prior to going to Philadelphia. Then they went from Philadelphia back home. So you think about where's the testing at? And you got to understand that these players knew that they were positive prior to going to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But they went anyway. Then they go back home, and now Major League Baseball has canceled all games through Sunday. And I don't think that's more than that equates to a week, Charlton.
Yeah.
So Rob Manfred doesn't have a clue right now of what he's doing and talking about canceling Marlins games.
Yeah.
What about the Rays? They're down there in Florida. So when the next state pops up and you have games that are canceled, maybe Major League Baseball should do what the Prime Minister of Canada did. Say, hey, you can't go to Florida. So we're going to take all the games out of Florida. We're going to take the Marlins out, and we're going to take the Rays out. And we're going to play in another state. They can't have any more home games down there. If you look at the number of COVID-19 tests that are showing positive in that state every day, Charlton, and they've also had a record high in deaths every day this week. So when you look at that, who are you caring about? You can say we're doing this for the money, but it's been a long time since I think any dead person spent some money, Charlton, regardless of what they had in their bank account.
Well, they're not concerned about that because they feel that they're just like chickens on a chicken farm, man. And when they send one chicken off to the chicken ranch or whatever that place, Magic City, they just grow more chickens, Big C. They don't care about the chicken. They just put some barbecue sauce on it, some hot sauce, and they eat it. If you think about the same thing that I saw in the Bay Area, the Padres coming in town, play the Giants. The guys are not social distancing. So Manfred might be the leader. He might be the commissioner, but there's a lot of guys that just don't look at science either, Big C. Major League Baseball, former Oakland Athletics. Think about it. Bruce Maxwell, who became the first Major League player to kneel during the national anthem in 2017. Would you believe he signed a minor league contract with the New York Mets, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Matthews, Charlton, he was disappointed that players did not back him when he took the stance when he was a catcher for the Oakland A's back in 2017.
Yeah.
Taking a knee in flight of what Colin Kaepernick was protesting, social justice, Charlton, in America. And yet we see on opening day many players around the major leagues wanting to take a knee. And this is why I keep saying everybody 3-4 years late in their actions, knowing what was wrong then is still wrong now. And you wanted to ostracize people for speaking out because you want to say they were ahead of their time. And it's not a time for that conversation now because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for those people who perpetuate the violence and injustice.
Yeah.
Conversation will always be uncomfortable for them because they're comfortable in the situation that they're in, that they're not being oppressed, they're not being violated, and they're not being held back, Charlton. So it's always going to be uncomfortable for them to have a conversation where other people seek equality in America.
Yeah.
So Bruce Matthews gets another opportunity at the major league. He was a major league catcher, Charlton, that for 3 years he's had to sit at home because he took a knee like Colin Kaepernick.
Well, I think, again, for anybody that's upset about someone taking a knee, if you think it's insulting to the military, it was a Green Beret that told Colin Kaepernick to take a knee. Take your butt down to the nearest recruiting station and just enlist. Put your money and your body where your mouth is. Show that you're a real American. Go put your body on the line, not just your big lips talking about, oh, get the heck out of the country. No, go join up, Mike Ditka. They'll take you. Major League Baseball, Big C, with more COVID-19 cases. Really, what is next? I told you, all I saw was one cockroach crawl out of my food. It didn't look, if it was a chicken, I probably would have eaten it, okay? If I saw a chicken leg coming out of my rice, I probably would have eaten that chicken leg. But I won't eat no cockroach if I have a choice. Maybe I've already eaten it anyway, all the gravy they put on that food. But, it's all fair and love and war. People all over the world eat all kind of things. But what else? Is there any similar thing when 19 players show up with the COVID-19? They shutting down a whole city. Not a whole city, but a whole team. You even have a cancellation. The Yankees, that game is canceled at Philadelphia. Who would ever see a Yankees and Phillies game canceled, Big C? But it happened. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what's going to happen is you have to have another pandemic on another team. You think about 1/3 of the Marlins players have been quarantined, that they cannot play. They failed the test. So basically 2/3 of the roster has been, tested positive.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen, Charlton, you're going to have to get another baseball team with a catastrophic outbreak, where you're going to have 10 to a dozen players test positive for baseball to really sit back and have a salient moment saying, we cannot do this. We can't go on with this. We can't protect the players. Because that 113-page manual that they wasted all that paper and all that ink on, Charlton, printing it out, none of the players have, stayed within those guidelines.
No, and it's hard to. You can't, when you think about staying, it's like dating. You ever go on a date and you can't put your hands on the person you're on a date with? Even if you're at these dating websites, you got to swipe left or swipe right. You can't even put your hand on the person. You can only touch the screen. Is that what? You can only touch the screen, Big C. How can we have sports where you can't touch the person you got to put out, Big C?
Well, Charlton, you're talking about the reticular activation system. What you do naturally all the time when you talk about athletes, something you've been doing since you were a little kid. You got your first stick of bubble gum and your first bag of sunflower seeds on the baseball diamond, Charlton. This is what baseball players do. You hit a home run. The first base coach is slapping you on the butt as you go around, giving a high five. You get to the home plate. You got your team, meeting you. You're doing high fives or the forearm bash, on the way to the dugout. And so there's no way you're practicing social distance.
Yeah.
Emotion takes over in sports.
Yeah.
This is the one thing you can't take out of sports is emotion. And just like when we talked about football, you got 80 players going 80 different directions when they leave the locker room. It's the same thing with baseball. You got 30 players going 30 different directions when they leave the locker room.
Yeah.
Some of them are stopping by on the way home to get chicken wings, because the wife did bring something home to eat, so they stopped and got chicken wings.
Yeah.
So when you think about this and you're dealing with significant others, you're dealing with family members, Charlton, you can't quarantine when you're not in a bubble. It's impossible. You have to deal with the public. You got to stop and get some gas sometime on the way home.
Yeah.
So when you walk inside that convenience store, when you're getting some gas, and people recognize you, can I get your autograph? You're taking the pen from somebody out of their hands.
Yeah.
Wasn't like you walked into the bathroom and started washing your hands afterwards. These things happen.
Yeah.
You put yourself in vulnerability's way. So Rob Manfred is just waiting on the next shoe to drop where you get at least 10 to 12 players test positive on another team, and I think he's going to shut the season down.
Well, he'll just find some other player. He's not the one being at risk, Big C. Tonight's Major League Baseball schedule, Toronto, Washington. You have Chicago at Cincinnati, Atlanta at Tampa Bay, Milwaukee at Pittsburgh, Kansas City at Detroit, the New York Mets at Boston. I love the Black Lives Matter outside of the turnpike there in Massachusetts. That's a really good. It is off the ground, Big C. But that's a good thing. I really like that. Chicago White Sox at Cleveland, St. Louis at Minnesota, Arizona at Texas, LA Dodgers, they're at Houston. And there's a lot of cameras in Houston. The guys from LA were saying, why do they have so many cameras down here in Houston? Seattle's at the LA Angels, Colorado's Oakland, and San Diego Padres at the San Francisco Giants. And yes, nobody is washing their hands, and everybody can do what they got to do. I just hope that we can keep on top of science, and that's the best thing we can do. But I want to ask your thoughts. Dusty Baker, I like Dusty Baker. I like the way he's like a player's coach, Big C. He's a player's manager. Played the game, Northern California kid, had a lot of success with the San Francisco Giants. They went down to Anaheim, and I think he pulled one of his pitchers too soon, but that's my opinion. He's forgotten more baseball than I'll ever know. Had a good run in Cincinnati, had a good run with the Nationals, had a good run in Chicago. That kid that grabbed the ball, Dusty's had a lot of success, and now he's down in Houston, and they've actually extended his contract through 2021. I think he's 71 years old, and he's playing a role that he loves as manager. But down in Houston, and this time of year, I guess Dusty needs money like everybody else. Big C, a good thing. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the extension of the contract came, Charlton, because Houston believes that there's not going to be a 2020 season, so you just extend him one more year so he'll have an opportunity to put in a full year.
Yeah, I really hope so. I remember just the buzz that you had in San Francisco when he was here, and Barry Bonds was hitting home runs. It seemed like handshakes, and it really brought the Giants to the top of the baseball world. I want to finish up with some talk on some NFL, but before I do that, and I was thinking about what you said earlier about you can't touch anybody. Of course, when you go to different places, you're not supposed to handshake or anything. In baseball, the protocol to keep your hands to yourself. And I've noticed that every time, not that we can be, too afraid of everything, but whenever a pitcher's throwing a pitch, he throws to the catcher takes the ball out of the glove, throws it right back to the pitcher. So they're trading sweat back and forth, those two players. And then if the ball is hit, it's gone out into the outfield where someone's going to pick up the ball with the glove and grab it with the hand and throw it to first base. There's really no way to social distance at all. Does that make sense, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's factual that at least on any given play that 4 people can be involved in touching the baseball, Charlton.
Yeah.
So as you look at using this little object that is going to have body fluids from every player who touches it, because you're going to sweat in the humidity at this time of the season, Charlton, playing baseball. And so there's no way of protecting. And when you hit the ball, Charlton, you're going to get congratulatories by your teammates.
Yeah.
On the field and in the dugout. Do this by instinct. This is what you've always done.
Habit. Yeah.
It's like telling a fat kid he can't eat cake. And he's sitting on the table with a knife in it. It's going to happen.
Or skinny kid, too, Big C. Let's not get the hate mail. Sometimes skinny kids, they just don't eat enough, Big C. It's all fair love and war. NCAA Big Ten is reeling right now. You think about it, Iowa has halted all workouts for 14 days. 2 players tested positive COVID-19. What the world's the Big Ten going to do this season if they can't get more free labor, Big Z? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you look at Michigan State was hit just a couple days ago, Charlton, where they quarantined for 14 days. We talked about Rutgers yesterday. And now Iowa. That's 3 teams, Charlton, out of one conference, Power 5 conference, that are quarantining right now for 14 days.
Yeah.
So you're talking about these teams halfway through August before they can assume workouts once again. But this is just the tip of it. And when you look at those states, Charlton, and we know that Ohio, Mike DeWine, mandated face masks for the entire state, and so the Ohio State team is going to have to wear face masks, Charlton. But when you look at the surrounding area of the Big Ten and the map that it covers from Nebraska to New Jersey, that's a lot of land mass, Charlton, that you're covering.
Yeah.
And here it is. You got 3 teams already out of, I believe it's 15 teams in the conference, 13 teams in the conference that, have tested positive for COVID-19. How do you protect your opponents? You're talking about just playing conference games.
Yeah.
How can your opponents stay safe? And then when you look at the NCAA and Mark Emmers, they're talking about testing players on Thursday, once a week on Thursday. So as you look at it, players will go 7 days, Charlton, or 6 days without having a COVID-19 test.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that test back like you would in the NFL and Major League Baseball, these billion-dollar corporations that can get any test that they want turned around. You're talking about testing 13 universities on Thursday, Charlton, 100 players each. So you're talking 13,000 players that you're going to be testing.
Yeah.
1,300 players.
Yeah.
1,300 players that you're supposed to get a response from back. So out of that 1,300, if 300 test positive, what do you do about a game?
I think, again, the Ivy League tends to have a higher respect for life and health because we know people get better. That's just the way it is. At the same time, why put someone in that situation? But the problem is, too, Big C, no matter what we say, we're not the ones out there that are out there touching bodies and rubbing up against people. And when you think about the guidelines, the pages, I think you said 113 pages for Major League Baseball, can someone explain to me how a football team is going to social distance? It's only going to be the coaches and the administrators that don't have to touch anybody. It's going to be all those players. Most of them look just like you and me, Big C, for the teams that win in the Power 5. And they're telling those kids, hey, it's okay. Read these guidelines, and it's going to keep you safe. But I just think it's a bad thing, but people tend to do bad things. I want to also throw something at you. You talked about testing is once a week. 3 days out from kickoff, Big C, creates a massive gap where infection can spread. That's what the NCAA college football's efforts are to play a quote-unquote safe, a safe season. That's like trying to go out and get chicken wings without washing your hands. There's really no way to be safe. If you're gonna touch that chicken, Big C, you might have to get some grease on your hands. Your thoughts?
Well, what the NCAA is doing, Charlton, is like saying flush your toilet once a week.
Once a week.
Just
gross.
And deal with that. Flush your toilet once a week.
That would be gross.
That's what they're saying about testing players as far as playing football here in the fall, Charlton. That's the same type of contamination and bacteria that they want to build up with these players because football is the filthiest sport that you can be involved in.
Yeah.
If you smell a helmet the day after practice, if you didn't wash it that day after practice, it reeks, Charlton. It is bad.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of bacteria that's inside that helmet. And these helmets are clashing every play, Charlton. That's why you have all the scars on the helmet.
Yeah.
The bent-up face mask because they're clashing. And when you're clashing, you're having these fluids splash back and forth between each other. I mean, if you ever look at slow-mo now, Charlton, that they have on football players in these high-definition television, you're watching the sweat drip down off of their
all the
face
time
from underneath that face mask, Charlton. This sweat is what hits the other player in the face when you have these violent clashes on the football field.
Yeah.
So as you talk about testing once every 7 days, like I said, flush your toilet once every 7 days and see how comfortable you are.
I had a roommate. I think he took your advice. He never wanted to flush the toilet. That guy was just something else. I won't even say his name, but it's pretty sad that some people actually, they don't think that's a bad idea. I heard George Carlin, a great comedian, Big Z, he was saying we wash our hands too much. And when he was a kid, he used to lick everything. He didn't wash his hand. And sometimes he only washed his hand, if necessary, when he did a number 2 in the bathroom, Big C. And he said he's never sick. Do you think that he has what's called that herd immunity, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, there's going to be a lot of people hurrying to the emergency room, Charlton, from this COVID-19 that are playing sports.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they just think it's like anything else. They'll just get over it. And a lot of people will. It's all fair and love and war. NBA basketball, they talked about having, I know you were saying how watching the game is not the same because there's no crowd noise, there's no rush. Even if you go to a NASCAR and they don't let people go, if you watch NASCAR on TV, you can hear the roar of the engine. You can hear it. It sounds amazing. NBA doesn't have that, but they are experimenting to try to add some type of, I guess, artificial intelligence, some fake fans, kind of like what you get when you play an NBA 2000K or whatever they call the video games. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I'd rather go to Magic City and see the real one instead of some artificial generated stuff, Charlton.
Yeah. Now, since you are a patron, I hear you're not supposed to spread a lot of money around. In fact, even here in Northern California, when you go through to buy food at a restaurant, they'll say, we don't want to give out change because of whatever reason. How do strippers get their money? If they can't, they got to lay the money on the ground, but they still got to pick it up to get it big, unless they're going to give it a Bitcoin, Big. So your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you go into an adult establishment like that, when you put in your request for orders, Charlton, you put in a request for the number of ones that you want, how many stacks you want of ones. And so, they don't give out coins because it might leave bruises on the body.
Yeah, but they still got to pick them up. I guess you got to do what you got to do. You got to eat.
Wear your plastic gloves.
Hey, that's a very good point, Big C. You seem like you have a lot of experience, Big C. It's all fair in love and war. In England,
I've gone out and had dinner on a few different occasions.
Hey, man gotta eat. Man was not meant to live on air and water alone. Man gotta eat, Big C. That's why God created the great chicken, as they call it, Yardbird, down south, Big C. In England, soccer team Manchester United. Would you believe that they are fined? They've been watching POTUS on TV, Big C. They were fined because of obstruction. Manchester City obstructed the investigation into his finances. I guess they don't want to pick up money either, Big C. They were fined $12 million, the Court of Arbitration for Sports said in a ruling published today, Big C. So when they are trying to obstruct to show how much money they're making or how much money they don't want to give up on the toke, Big C, they got to pay the penalty anyway, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is the face of sports, Charlton. When you break the rules and you know that you're voluntarily breaking the rules and these fines come in from the league and the commissioners, Charlton, this is to be expected.
Now, why is this a 93-page document, Big C, and it shed further light on how the club successfully overturned a 2-year ban from the European competitions imposed by the EUFA. Why can't a contract just be 1 or 2 pages, maybe even 1? They always have 90 pages so that way you can't find out the collusion going on in the contract, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is what you talk about all the time. Lawyers write up these contracts, so they're not made for the layman to understand.
Yeah, that's very well said. I want to speak on something before we come up on the close. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. I remember with NASCAR, they banned the Confederate flag, and POTUS had a tantrum because he said that's his favorite flag, Big C, for them. He's the president of the United States, but the Confederate flag is his favorite flag, Big C. POTUS got really upset when they wanted to desecrate his favorite flag and his favorite statues of this Confederate men. But NASCAR, they are really doing something that I think is a great thing. I grew up watching Richard Petty and A.J. Ford and Big Danny Dongard. I was watching all those race car drivers when I was a young boy, but they're looking at minority drivers to broaden their sports exposure. Now, I know everybody's loving Bubba Wallace right now, except for the guys with the noose and some of the good old boys that think it's okay. What's wrong with a noose and a swastika? A lot of those good old boys, they couldn't care less. But what's the effort? Is it like Jackie Robinson, in a sense, getting into NASCAR? There's been black drivers before, but never really with the type of publicity that Bubba Wallace has gotten. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you're driving in NASCAR, it comes down to sponsorship. Can you afford to compete on the big oval tracks? And that's what it is at any race circuit, Charlton. Do you have the sponsorship? You can, tout any nationality of people that you want to come into your racing world, Charlton, but it comes down, will the sponsors sponsor their cars? If you don't have those stickers all over your cars, Charlton, you're not going to compete.
Yeah, and they got to get the sponsors. Ross Caruth is the name of the young kid. He's an 18-year-old kid, is a NASCAR prospect, a young African-American driver, one of a half dozen youngsters participating in the Drive for Diversity program, and is tasked with finding and developing drivers for sports that's lean on women and people of color behind the wheel. So I applaud the effort that NASCAR is making, but I'm still a bit flummoxed as to why. Maybe I'm not so flummoxed when I look at it. I understand that some people may have an affinity to the Confederate flag, but I would never think that the President of the United States would stand on the side of a Confederate flag and statues as opposed to maybe women and men of color, people of color, that always felt ostracized from that group. So NASCAR's understanding the sins of their past. They're trying to fix it. Is there any hope that POTUS will be welcoming to the minority drivers that they're trying to bring into NASCAR? Big, so your thoughts?
POTUS is what POTUS is. He's grown up being a bigot and a racist, Charlton, his entire life. That's not going to change. Even on his obituary, it will have, this country was led by a bigot and a racist.
And I'm sure he'll be very proud. He'll probably have the swastika on top of his last final resting place. It's all fair and love and war. People got to decide November 3rd what kind of country they really want to live in. The land of the free for everybody, or the land of someone who doesn't care about anybody but himself. So I wanted to just touch on, before we close, Patrick Mahomes, obviously congratulations. Like this, 2020 has been a rough season for a lot of people, a rough year. But it's been a great year financially for Patrick Mahomes. The $500 million contract, and then being ownership of the Kansas City Royals. And then they just came off of a Super Bowl that was also won in 2020. Maybe we should all have ketchup on our steak. Fixer, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I use ketchup, but not on my steak. I love a little salt, pepper, and the purity of the meat.
Yeah, the salt and pepper. I like a little ketchup on everything, Big C. And we just talked about the NFL and how Major League Baseball, NBA basketball they still want to go forward. The Williams deal, when he went down to get the chicken wings, nothing wrong with that. Every man loves chicken. Some guys just don't want to admit it. And everybody, when they have whatever they need to get them going to be successful, there's nothing wrong with that. Baltimore Ravens, they had some players that pulled out also, didn't report to camp. But when will we see a guy like Lamar Jackson? I don't think Patrick Mahomes would ever say, I'm not going to play because there's too much. The NFL is trying to make him the prodigal son as he bypasses Brady for the NFL's favorite quarterback. I don't think he would ever say, thanks for all the money, now I'm going to sit out too. That makes sense, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the money doesn't kick in for another year, Charlton, with Patrick Mahomes. And it comes down to what the league is looking at. I think that the NFL is actually going to pull the plug on the season, Charlton, because they're monitoring closely what's going on in the world of baseball, where you're not practicing social distancing and you can't practice social distancing. And once they get into training camp, I think, Charlton, that the NFL has had 34 players thus far test positive for COVID-19 since the middle of July. So when you look at that, they haven't even gotten into training camp.
Yeah.
So once they get into training camp fully, Charlton, and this disease starts to spread and you can't contain it, the NFL will have to hastily end the season.
So what does this mean? I mean, they're going to get as much money as they can. We know it's a money grab. If the NFL sides with science, the only way they play the season if they become antithetical to science, but they've already shown that. If the NFL, it's a really question for Vegas. Who's more likely to cancel the season first? Would it be the NFL in the sake of player safety, or would it be college football programs like the Ivy League? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, it comes down to the totality of the numbers, realistically, what you're looking at. You can't defeat the science when it comes down to numbers. When you run out of enough players to be able to field a team, Charlton, and you run out of enough players in critical positions to be able to field a team, if you get all three of your quarterbacks come down with COVID-19, how do you play a game? It's just impossible, Charlton. You lose four, you're starting offensive linemen. You don't have enough in reserve to have a game. because you lose 4 starting offensive linemen. You don't want to put your running back and your quarterback health at risk with some guys, Charlton, that have not played.
Yeah. I wanna ask you a question, and before we close out, everybody's gonna do what they got to do. You know, laughter's good too, because you are an aficionado at these Magic City clubs or whatever they're called, Magic Club, Chicken Wing Club. You know, sometime at your restaurants, when someone has too many libations, I hear the bartender says, "Hey, you've had enough. We're gonna call a cab or Uber and get you home." What's the cue when you've had too many chicken wings at a club? How do they cut you off from that? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the thing about chicken wings is that you order a variety of them, and you want to eat them nice and slow and take your time and let that flavor resonate in your mouth as you're taking them down and enjoying it across your palate. Charlton.
Yeah, this nice and slow, like I guess his name is Frankie Beverly back in the day. It's all fair, love, and war. Big C. Back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, we had some NFL players turning up today at training camp, as many training camps for bringing in their veterans. And we hopefully that, this COVID-19 test, Charlton, doesn't hit at a pandemic rate like we've had in the state of Florida. And once again, I want to say thank you to our frontline healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, first responders. I know that you're tired, and I know that you've been working hard and every day trying to keep America safe and alive. And we thank you for your undoubted efforts.
And remember, the words of the wine is, we fall down, but we get up. You can get up every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.